"No one owns me," said the Apache woman, when the cowboy cut her chains at dawn. The desert was quiet that morning, almost too quiet. The sun had not yet fully risen, and a gentle dusty wind swept across the endless sand and rocky terrain. Somewhere in the distance a few birds chirped, but the silence of the desert was overwhelming. In that stillness, a small figure struggled against rough ropes that bound her wrists and ankles. She was an Apache woman, tall and strong, her dark hair tangled with dust, her eyes sharp and alert. Despite the pain in her wrists, she lifted her head and surveyed her surroundings. Her name was Naya, and even in this moment of fear she refused to let despair take hold. Naya had grown up learning how to survive in the desert, how to track animals, find water in hidden places, and read the signs of nature. Her people had taught her the importance of courage, independence, and pride. She had always been careful, always aware of the dangers around her, but today, fate had been cruel. She had been captured the night before while walking to a nearby spring, carrying a small clay pot of water for her tribe. A group of outlaws had ambushed her, dragging her across the desert and leaving her chained in this remote place, hidden behind a ridge of rocks. Though her body ached and the ropes bit into her skin, Naya refused to cry or plead. She knew that showing fear would give her captors power over her. Her spirit was stronger than any chain. She took a deep breath, letting the morning air fill her lungs, and she began to plan her next move. Her eyes scanned the area carefully. There was a small rock ledge nearby that could provide cover, and a narrow path that led away from the camp. She counted her options, weighing each one silently. Escape was difficult but not impossible. Her people had survived far worse, and she would not be an exception. Meanwhile, several miles away, a lone cowboy rode through the desert. His name was Jack, a man known in nearby towns for his honesty, skill, and unwavering sense of justice. He was tall, with broad shoulders, a weathered face, and eyes that missed little. Jack had been traveling from town to town, helping where he could, often dealing with cattle disputes, lost travelers, or criminals. That morning, he had heard whispers from a small village about a woman who had been taken by a gang of outlaws. Something in him stirred. He could not ignore it. Without hesitation, he had mounted his horse and followed the trail into the desert, guided by faint tracks in the sand. As the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Naya heard the faint sound of hooves. Her eyes narrowed. She could barely see the figure at first, but instinct told her it was someone approaching. She held her breath, unsure whether it was friend or foe. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of leather and horses. It was not the scent of the outlaws who had captured her. This was different. There was a calmness in the way the horse moved, a precision that suggested the rider was skilled and careful. Jack approached the ridge silently, keeping his horse low and steady. He had spotted the ropes glinting in the sunlight and the small figure struggling against them. He could see the woman clearly now. Her eyes were fierce, refusing to give in, and for a moment he admired her courage. Many would have been broken by fear long before this, yet here she was, standing tall, even while chained. Jack's jaw tightened. He would not let this woman remain a prisoner. But he also knew he had to be careful. The outlaws were likely nearby, watching, waiting for any mistake. A single wrong move could mean danger for both of them. He dismounted quietly, tying his horse to a nearby rock. He moved slowly, using the rocks as cover, keeping his eyes on Naya. He noticed the way her muscles tensed with every movement, how she seemed ready to fight if necessary. She was not helpless, and he respected that. Naya, sensing movement, froze. Her heart pounded, but she did not panic. She had faced challenges alone before, though none like this. Whoever was approaching was careful, deliberate, and not aggressive. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now her instincts told her that this stranger might help. She could not be certain, but the hope sparked quietly in her chest. Jack came closer, stopping just out of reach of the ropes. "Easy," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." Naya's eyes narrowed. She had been deceived before, and she knew better than to trust words alone. She studied him carefully, noting the way his hand rested near his holster, yet not threatening. There was no malice in his expression, only concern. Slowly, she nodded, signaling that she would listen. Jack knelt near her, examining the chains that bound her. They were thick, old and rusted in some places. He could feel the weight they carried, not just physically but emotionally. A person chained like this loses more than freedom. They lose hope. He knew he had to act quickly. He pulled a small knife from his belt, careful not to startle her. With practiced skill, he began to work on the ropes. Each cut was precise, deliberate, and measured. Naya watched quietly, her body coiled like a spring, ready to move if anything went wrong. She could feel the tension in the air, the uncertainty of the moment. Yet she also felt a strange sense of relief. Here was someone who seemed to understand the value of freedom, someone who was willing to risk himself to help another. It was a feeling she had not experienced often, and it brought a small warmth to her chest. As Jack worked, he spoke softly.
I need you to stay calm. We'll get you out of here.
Naya nodded again. Her voice was steady, though her body shook slightly from the tension.
I'm not weak, she said. I can survive.
I just need a chance. Jack smiled faintly, understanding her words more than she knew. You will have that chance, he said. I promise. The knife cut through the final rope and Naya flexed her wrists, feeling the circulation return. She rubbed her skin where the ropes had chafed, wincing slightly at the pain, but the feeling of freedom, even just a little, was overwhelming. She stood up slowly, testing her strength, and looked at Jack. No one owns me, she said, her voice steady and strong. I am not yours to save, not yours to lead. I can make my own way. Jack nodded, respecting her words. He had not come to claim her or decide her fate, only to ensure she had the choice to be free. Suddenly, in the distance, they heard a shout. The outlaws were nearby, and their presence was growing closer. The moment of freedom was temporary if they did not move quickly. Jack gestured toward the narrow path leading away from the ridge. We need to go, now. Naya's eyes scanned the terrain, noting the obstacles, the cliffs, and the small stream that could guide them. She nodded, ready to move, but also aware that she would not follow blindly. She would guide herself and make decisions as they went. Together they moved cautiously, Jack keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings while Naya led the way through hidden paths, using her knowledge of the land. The morning sun rose higher, casting long shadows and making the desert appear even more vast and empty. Every step was filled with tension, every sound amplified in the silence. But for the first time in many hours, Naya felt a glimmer of hope. She could see the possibility of survival, of freedom, and it strengthened her resolve. As they made their way through the desert, Jack could see the determination in her eyes. She was not a damsel in distress. She was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had endured hardships most could not imagine. And he was honored to walk beside her, not as a savior, but as an ally. The desert stretched endlessly before them, full of danger and uncertainty, but also full of opportunity. For Naya, every step was a reminder that she could reclaim her life. For Jack, every step was a reminder of why he could not ignore injustice. By mid-morning, the sound of the outlaws had faded behind them. The desert, once silent and foreboding, now seemed like a place of potential, a vast canvas upon which their journey could unfold. Naya moved steadily, her body gaining strength with each step, her mind sharp and alert. Jack followed, giving her space but remaining close enough to protect if necessary. They had survived the first test, but both knew that more challenges awaited. Yet for now, the chains were gone, and the desert, harsh as it was, felt like a place where freedom could be found. As they walked, the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant mountains. The horizon glowed with the promise of a new day. Naya's spirit, once trapped and confined, felt a flicker of something powerful, hope. Not the hope of being saved, but the hope of reclaiming her life, on her own terms, with courage as her guide. Jack, watching her, felt a deep respect and admiration. He knew that this journey would be difficult, but he also knew that beside this strong Apache woman he could face anything the desert threw at them. And in that moment, as the first full light of dawn illuminated the endless sand and rocks, both understood something profound. Freedom was not given, it was earned, and the journey toward it, though dangerous, was worth every step. The desert sun climbed higher, turning the sand and rocks into a shimmering sea of heat. Naya and Jack moved carefully, every step measured, aware that the outlaws were still somewhere behind them. The morning wind carried faint sounds from the distance, the occasional cry of a bird or the rustle of desert brush, but nothing seemed to warn them of immediate danger. Still, both remained alert. Naya's senses, honed by years in the wilderness, were sharp. She could feel the vibration of the earth beneath her feet, notice the subtle shift in the wind, and hear even the slightest movement in the brush. Jack, seasoned in the ways of the desert and human nature, trusted her instincts, following her lead but keeping a protective watch. They reached a small rock formation, a natural shelter that offered shade and a brief moment of safety. Naya stopped, crouching to catch her breath, her dark hair clinging to her forehead with sweat. Jack dismounted, loosening the straps on his saddle, letting his horse rest, its flanks heaving as it drank from a small waterhole nearby. He offered Naya a sip of water from his canteen. She accepted, her hands shaking slightly from exertion and tension. The water was cold and sweet, refreshing her in a way that made her feel alive after the night she had endured. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady but quiet, almost hesitant. I don't usually trust strangers, but I believe you're not here to harm me." Jack nodded, his eyes serious. "I'm not. I've never liked injustice, and I've never turned my back on someone in need. You're free now, and I intend to keep it that way." Naya studied him for a moment, measuring his words against his actions. So far he had acted with caution, respect, and skill. That was rare in the world beyond her tribe. "Free? Yes," she said, flexing her wrists, the memory of the chain still burning. "But free doesn't mean safe. Not yet." The sound of hooves in the distance made them both tense. The outlaws were tracking them, no doubt using the marks they had left in the sand. Jack motioned for Naya to follow him behind the rocks. They crouched low, watching as a group of 3 men appeared over the ridge, their eyes scanning the desert, weapons in hand. They had clearly expected to find her still chained, unresisting. The sight of Naya walking beside Jack must have confused them. "She's still alive," one of the outlaws muttered.
Where the hell did she go? Another laughed cruelly. Doesn't matter.
"We'll catch her before noon. They'll pay for what they did to us." Jack tightened his grip on his rifle, but he did not fire. He wanted to avoid unnecessary violence if possible, though he was ready if the outlaws attacked. Naya's eyes, dark and unwavering, met his for a brief moment. She had survived too much to be intimidated now. "Let them come," she whispered. "We'll make sure they regret it." Jack gave a slight nod, impressed by her courage. The two of them moved silently, navigating the desert terrain with precision. Naya led Jack through narrow paths, rocky ledges, and hidden depressions in the sand that made tracking difficult. Her knowledge of the land was unmatched. She could sense where water might lie beneath the surface, where rocks would provide cover, and where the sun's glare would make their movements less visible. Jack followed closely, learning quickly from her expertise. He admired her independence and self-reliance, qualities that set her apart from anyone he had ever met. By late morning, they reached a small canyon that cut through the desert like a natural corridor. The walls were high, casting shadows that offered a temporary refuge from the sun. Naya suggested they take a short rest there, and Jack agreed. They found a spot under an overhang, where a cool breeze swept through the rocks. Naya crouched, observing the canyon's mouth, her senses alert for any sign of pursuit. Jack stood nearby, keeping watch and sharpening his awareness. Both knew that the outlaws would not give up easily. They were desperate men, and desperation often made people dangerous. As they rested, Jack spoke quietly. "How did you survive being captured?" he asked, genuinely curious. Naya looked at him, her eyes dark and steady. "I survived because I refused to let anyone break me," she said. I faced hunger, heat, and death before. Chains cannot take my spirit. They cannot own me." Her words carried weight, not just as a statement, but as a lesson. Jack felt a deep respect for her strength. Most people, when faced with such danger, would have given up, but Naya had endured. Her courage was rare, and he understood why the world had underestimated her at first. Suddenly a sound echoed through the canyon, rocks tumbling, a shout carried by the wind. The outlaws had found a way closer than anticipated. Jack motioned for Naya to stay low. They pressed against the canyon wall, hiding behind a boulder as the men appeared at the mouth of the canyon. The outlaws' faces were twisted with frustration and anger. "She's here!" one shouted. "I know it!" another swore, pointing in their direction, but they could not see them clearly. Jack whispered to Naya, "We need to move. Now." She nodded, adjusting her footing carefully. They moved silently along the canyon wall, keeping shadows on their side, letting the outlaws' shouts echo harmlessly past them. Every step was precise, every movement calculated. The outlaws were skilled in tracking, but Naya's knowledge of the land and Jack's careful strategy gave them an advantage. As they reached a bend in the canyon, Naya spotted a small ledge above, hidden from view. "We can climb there," she said quietly. "It will give us cover, and they won't see us." Jack followed her, moving with agility despite the weight of his rifle and supplies. The ledge was narrow, but it provided a safe path to a higher ridge where they could gain a better vantage point. From there, they would be able to see if the outlaws were giving up or planning another move. Once on the ridge, they paused to catch their breath. The desert stretched out before them, vast and unforgiving, but also full of opportunity. Jack looked at Naya, seeing the determination in her eyes. She was not a woman who needed rescuing. She was a woman reclaiming her life, and he was simply helping her navigate the dangers along the way. She met his gaze, acknowledging his presence, but making it clear she was in control. Hours passed as they moved carefully across the ridge. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the desert, making every step a challenge. Naya's endurance amazed Jack. She carried little, yet she moved swiftly, her senses attuned to every sound and shadow. The outlaws were nowhere in sight for the moment, but the threat hung over them like a dark cloud. They both knew that any mistake could be costly. Around midday, they spotted a small oasis in the distance, a cluster of trees and a pond of water shimmering in the heat. It was a rare sight in the harsh desert, a sign of relief and hope. Naya's face lit up slightly. "We can rest there," she said, pointing. "We'll refill our water and regain some strength." Jack nodded, agreeing. The oasis offered a temporary sanctuary, but they both remained vigilant. Freedom, they knew, was not yet secure. As they approached the oasis, Naya's mind remained sharp. She noted the tracks in the sand around the water, signs that other travelers had been there recently. The outlaws could be close. She led Jack carefully, moving in a zigzag pattern to avoid leaving obvious tracks, using every trick she had learned from her tribe. Jack followed, trusting her knowledge, impressed by her skill and resourcefulness. Finally, they reached the water. Naya knelt to drink, letting the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. Jack did the same, both of them grateful for this brief moment of reprieve. They refilled their canteens, and Jack tied his horse to a sturdy tree near the water. Despite the danger that still loomed, there was a quiet moment of peace. Naya allowed herself a small smile, not of relief alone, but of pride. She had survived capture, she had survived the desert, and she was still free. But the peace was short-lived. From the distance, the faint sound of shouting reached their ears. The outlaws had not given up. They were closing in, relentless in their pursuit. Naya stood, her eyes scanning the horizon, her mind already calculating their next move. Jack readied himself, moving beside her, prepared to defend her, if necessary. This was not the end. It was only another step in the journey toward true freedom. Together, they moved from the oasis, using the cover of rocks and sparse vegetation. Naya led them through hidden paths, guiding Jack with quiet commands. Every step was deliberate, every movement cautious. The desert stretched endlessly before them, but for Naya, every step was a claim of her independence, every movement a declaration that she would not be owned, not by chains, not by fear, not by anyone. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Naya and Jack found a secluded ridge to rest for the night. They made a small fire, careful to keep the smoke low, and shared a simple meal from the supplies Jack had carried. They spoke little, each absorbed in their thoughts, the events of the day heavy on their minds. Yet in the silence, a mutual respect grew. They were equals in this journey, each relying on the other in different ways, but neither dependent in spirit. The desert night fell, cool and quiet. Stars stretched across the sky in endless brilliance. Naya lay near the fire, keeping watch with sharp eyes. Jack sat nearby, rifle ready, listening to the whispers of the wind. The outlaws could still find them, but for now they were safe. Naya felt the weight of the day lift slightly, replaced by a sense of control. She was no longer a prisoner. She was moving toward freedom, and nothing could take that from her. And in that quiet night, as the desert settled into darkness, both understood something essential. Survival was not only about strength, but about courage, wisdom, and the will to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, its vast emptiness both beautiful and dangerous. Naya led the way, her eyes scanning every shadow, every ridge, and every shift of wind. Jack followed closely, keeping an eye on the ground and horizon, ready to respond to any threat. Both were silent for a while, moving cautiously, their minds focused on the long journey ahead. Even though the immediate danger of the chains had passed, the outlaws were still out there, and freedom in the desert required vigilance. By late morning they had reached a narrow canyon, its walls rising sharply on either side. The sun blazed overhead, and the heat was intense. Naya wiped sweat from her forehead and took a deep breath. "We need to find water soon," she said, her voice calm but urgent. Jack nodded, spotting a few scrubby bushes and a trickle of water further down the canyon floor. "We'll get there. Take your time," he said. "We're in no hurry to rush into danger." Naya smiled faintly, appreciating his caution. She had survived alone in this harsh desert before, but now, with someone watching her back, the journey felt slightly less daunting. As they moved through the canyon, Naya spoke quietly about the land. She explained which plants could be eaten, which would help with thirst, and which rocks could hide small sources of water. Jack listened carefully, admiring her knowledge and resourcefulness. He had grown up in the West, familiar with deserts, but nothing compared to the deep understanding Naya had of every detail, every nuance of the land. He realized that survival was not just about strength or courage, it was about wisdom and awareness, something she had in abundance. Suddenly a rustle in the bushes made them both freeze. Naya crouched low, signaling Jack to do the same. From the undergrowth a small desert fox emerged, its orange fur bright against the sand. It paused for a moment, watching them with curious eyes, before disappearing into the shadows. Naya let out a quiet breath and smiled. "Even in danger, life finds a way," she said softly. Jack nodded, feeling a rare moment of calm. The desert, though harsh, was alive in ways people often overlooked. They reached the trickle of water, a small pool nestled between rocks. Naya knelt to drink, letting the cool liquid soothe her throat, while Jack helped refill their canteens. The small oasis, though modest, was a relief. For a brief moment they allowed themselves to relax, knowing that their vigilance could not be completely lowered. Naya's hands worked quickly, testing the water for safety, and her senses remained alert for any signs of the outlaws. After drinking, they continued their journey, moving along a narrow ridge that overlooked the desert below. From this vantage point, they could see the vast expanse of sand and rock stretching to the horizon. The beauty of the desert struck them both. The colors of the cliffs, the shadows cast by the rising sun, and the silence that enveloped everything. It was a harsh beauty, but a beauty nonetheless. Naya's eyes softened as she took it in, and for a moment Jack saw a side of her beyond the survivor, beyond the fighter. a woman who loved and understood the land she came from.
As the day grew hotter, the journey became more challenging. The sun's intensity made every step tiring, and their water supply was limited.
Naya suggested they rest in the shade of a large rock formation, giving their bodies a brief respite. They ate small rations of dried meat and bread, their movements careful and deliberate. Despite the hardships, Naya's spirit remained unbroken. She spoke little of fear or doubt, instead focusing on practical steps to survive and move forward. Jack admired her determination. Her independence was remarkable, but so was her ability to trust just enough to allow him to help. Late in the afternoon, they encountered a steep cliff that blocked their path. The only way forward was a narrow ledge that hugged the rock face, perilously close to a drop of several feet. Naya's heart quickened, but she did not panic. She had faced cliffs and ledges before, and she knew that careful movements could keep them safe. She tested the ledge first, placing her hands on the rock for balance. Jack followed, his hand occasionally brushing hers to steady himself. Their movements were slow, deliberate, and careful. Every step mattered. Halfway across the ledge, a small rock shifted under Jack's foot, sending a shower of dust down the cliff. Naya froze, her heart in her throat. Jack steadied himself quickly, laughing softly to ease the tension. "Almost got us," he said, smiling faintly. Naya shook her head, trying not to show how scared she had been for a moment. "Focus," she said quietly. "One step at a time. We don't have the luxury of mistakes." Her voice, calm and firm, reminded Jack why he trusted her judgment. Together, they completed the crossing safely, their relief quiet but profound. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, they found a shallow cave to spend the night. The temperature dropped quickly in the desert, and the wind picked up, swirling dust around them. Naya made a small fire, careful to keep it low and hidden, while Jack prepared their sleeping arrangements. They ate a small meal, sharing quiet conversation about the events of the day. Despite the exhaustion, there was a growing bond of mutual respect. Jack admired her independence and strength, while Naya appreciated his caution and willingness to act without imposing himself. Night fell, and the desert became a place of shadows and stars. Naya kept watch near the fire, her senses alert to every sound. Jack rested nearby, rifle ready, listening to the distant echoes of the desert. The outlaws could be anywhere, but for now, they were safe. Naya reflected on the day, thinking about the chains she had once been bound by and how far she had come. The desert was harsh, unforgiving, and dangerous, yet it was also a place of freedom, a freedom she had fought to reclaim and would continue to protect at all costs. The next morning they awoke early, the sun rising over the desert in a brilliant display of light and color. They packed their supplies and continued their journey, moving steadily and carefully. Naya led them along hidden paths, avoiding the main trails where the outlaws might expect them to travel. Jack followed, keeping an eye on the horizon and noting any signs of danger. Every movement, every decision, was guided by experience and awareness. Around midday they faced another challenge, a flash flood in a narrow canyon. Water rushed violently through the rocks, carrying debris and making passage dangerous. Naya assessed the situation quickly, noting the safest path across. She directed Jack to balance himself on a rock while she tested the water flow. Carefully, step by step, they crossed, each movement calculated and deliberate. The rush of water was frightening, but Naya's calm and skill guided them safely through. Jack could not help but admire her courage and intelligence. After crossing, they found a small plateau overlooking a distant settlement. Naya paused, scanning the area with sharp eyes. "We're close to help," she said softly, "but we're not safe yet. The outlaws are still out there, and they won't give up easily." Jack nodded, his gaze steady. "We'll be careful," he said. "We're almost there." Together they began the final stretch, moving quickly but cautiously, aware that freedom was near, but not guaranteed. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they approached the outskirts of the settlement. People went about their daily lives, unaware of the danger lurking in the desert. Naya and Jack kept to the shadows, avoiding attention. Yet relief and hope filled their hearts. The journey had been long and difficult, but they had survived. They had faced the desert, the outlaws, and countless obstacles, and they were stronger for it. Finally, as night fell, they entered the settlement safely. Naya's eyes shone with quiet triumph. She had reclaimed her freedom, not through submission or fear, but through courage, skill, and determination. Jack smiled, feeling a deep respect for the woman beside him. She was not someone to save. She was someone to walk alongside, a partner in survival, and a friend in the harsh world of the desert. For that night, they found shelter in a small cabin on the edge of town. Naya finally allowed herself to relax fully, her body sinking into rest. Jack kept watch, but he did not disturb her peace. She had earned it. And as the desert wind whispered outside, both understood that this journey had changed them. Naya had survived, proven her strength, and reclaimed her independence. Jack had witnessed her courage and learned that true freedom came not from protection, but from the will to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. The desert outside remained vast and wild, but inside the small cabin there was a sense of safety, respect, and quiet celebration of life. Naya and Jack had faced danger together, navigated the harshness of the desert, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And though the journey was not yet complete, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they could face it together, two souls united by courage, respect, and the unbreakable desire for freedom. The night in the desert settlement was quiet, but the tension in the air was almost tangible. Naya and Jack had found a small cabin on the edge of town to rest, but both knew that safety could be fleeting. The outlaws who had captured Naya were relentless, and their pursuit had not ended. The settlement was a small cluster of homes and a few dusty streets, its people unaware of the danger approaching. Naya stood by the window, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness, alert for any movement beyond the faint glow of the cabin's lantern. Jack moved quietly behind her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We're almost safe," he said softly, though his voice carried the same seriousness he always had. "But we need to be ready. They could come at any time." Naya turned to him, her dark eyes steady. "I am ready," she said, her voice calm. "They cannot take me again."
"I will not be chained, not by anyone." Jack nodded, respecting her words.
She was not asking for protection. She was stating a fact. She was a woman who had survived countless dangers, and she intended to remain free. Hours passed in silence as they prepared. Naya checked the doors and windows, making sure they were secure. Jack examined the surrounding area from the small porch, noting every shadow and movement. Together, they planned how to face any threat without unnecessary violence. They did not want to harm anyone unless absolutely necessary, but they would defend themselves if cornered. The desert had taught them both that survival often required courage, quick thinking, and clever strategies. Just before dawn, a faint noise stirred the air. The outlaws had arrived, moving through the settlement's outskirts. Their footsteps were careful but determined. Naya felt a surge of tension, but she did not panic. She had faced danger before, and she was not about to give in now. Jack crouched beside her, rifle ready, his eyes scanning for the intruders. They both knew that the confrontation would be decisive. Either the outlaws would be stopped, or they could regain control of Naya. The first outlaw appeared near the edge of the street, peering cautiously around a corner. Naya signaled to Jack, and they moved silently to a better vantage point. She had studied the layout of the settlement quickly, noticing alleys, doorways, and potential obstacles. Jack followed her lead, impressed by her skill. She was not just surviving, she was in control of the situation. The outlaws advanced, unaware of the trap that awaited them. Naya had positioned herself so that any attempt to reach the cabin would be met with careful resistance. She kept her movements deliberate, making sure she was not seen too early. Jack stayed close, ready to act, but allowing her to take the lead. This was not a rescue. It was a joint effort, a test of strategy and courage. One of the outlaws shouted, "She's in there! We'll take her!" But before they could move forward, Naya acted. She threw a small handful of sand into the nearest outlaw's eyes, causing him to stumble and cry out in surprise. Jack moved swiftly, using the distraction to block the next man's path, holding his ground without causing serious injury. The third outlaw hesitated, unsure of how to proceed, giving Naya the chance to take control. Her hands were quick, precise, and fearless. She moved with confidence, guiding Jack through the confrontation with silent signals and calm movements. The outlaws were confused. They had expected an easy capture, but Naya was not easy to control. She was clever and strong, and her determination shone through. Jack watched her work, admiration and respect filling his chest. She was not a woman in need of saving. She was a force of nature, reclaiming what had been stolen from her. The outlaws had underestimated her, and that mistake was costing them every step. With careful coordination, Naya and Jack guided the outlaws into a narrow alley, limiting their ability to advance. The confined space worked in their favor, making the outlaws hesitate and giving the pair the upper hand. Naya kept a watchful eye on the shadows, ready to act if any man tried to escape. Jack's rifle was steady, his movements calm and deliberate. They had practiced patience, and now it paid off. Finally, the outlaws realized they were outmatched. They were not expecting resistance from someone they had thought helpless. Naya stepped forward, her voice steady and firm. "You will leave this place," she said. "You will not touch me again. You will not harm anyone here. Leave, and you will face no further consequences." Her words carried authority, not threats. She did not need to intimidate with violence. Her courage and control were enough. The outlaws hesitated, glancing at one another. They had underestimated her and were now facing the consequences of their arrogance. Slowly, they backed away, realizing that this fight was lost. Jack remained close to Naya, ensuring they left without any sudden moves. The desert had taught them both that survival required intelligence as much as strength, and they had outsmarted the men who had tried to control them. Once the danger had passed, Naya and Jack stepped out into the quiet street. The first rays of dawn painted the settlement in soft light, illuminating the aftermath of the confrontation. Naya's hands were steady, her posture proud. She had faced her captors and reclaimed her freedom. Jack looked at her, admiration shining in his eyes. She was not just brave, she was unbreakable. They walked together through the streets, their steps deliberate, but calm. Naya led Jack to the edge of the settlement, where the desert stretched before them. She paused, taking in the vast landscape, feeling the wind against her face. For the first time in many days, she felt completely free. The chains were gone, the outlaws defeated, and the open desert called to her with promise and possibility. Jack stood beside her, respecting her silence. He knew that this moment belonged to her, that her victory was her own. She had survived capture, crossed the harsh desert, and faced those who sought to control her. Now she could step forward into a life of her choosing. He did not speak. He simply walked beside her, offering support without imposing himself. That was what she valued most, respect, not ownership. As they moved further into the desert, Naya reflected on her journey. She thought of the chains, the fear, the endless miles of sand and the moments when she had felt hopeless. Yet she had endured. She had relied on her knowledge, her courage, and her instincts. She had survived because she refused to give up, because she had chosen freedom over submission, and because she had trusted herself enough to act decisively. The journey had also taught her something unexpected: trust. Jack had earned it, not by demanding it, but by respecting her choices and standing beside her. She had allowed herself to rely on another person, not as a weakness, but as a practical necessity. Their partnership had been built on mutual respect, skill, and shared courage. It was a bond formed in the heat of danger, tested by the desert and strengthened by survival. As the sun rose higher, they reached a small ridge overlooking a wide valley. The desert stretched endlessly, but there was life here: streams, trees, and the promise of new beginnings. Naya stood tall, feeling the wind in her hair and the warmth of the sun on her face. She turned to Jack, her dark eyes meeting his. "I am free," she said softly, yet firmly, "and I will remain free, no matter what comes." Jack nodded, smiling faintly.
"I know," he said. "You've earned it."
"And no one can take it from you." For a while they simply stood there, taking in the vastness of the desert and the quiet peace of freedom. It was a hard-won moment, the culmination of days filled with fear, struggle, and courage. Naya's chains were gone, her captors defeated, and her spirit unbroken. She had faced the desert, the outlaws, and the harshness of survival, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Eventually, they began walking again, moving toward the distant settlement beyond the valley. The journey ahead was still long, but the hardest part was behind them. Naya felt a profound sense of relief, not just at her physical freedom, but at reclaiming her independence and strength. Jack remained close, ready to help if needed, but giving her the space she required. He had witnessed her courage, respected her autonomy, and shared in the triumph of her survival. As night fell once more, they found a small campsite near a stream. Naya built a small fire, careful to keep it low and hidden. They ate a simple meal, speaking quietly about the day and their plans for moving forward. The desert night was calm, stars glittering above, and for the first time in a long while, Naya felt a deep sense of peace. She had reclaimed her life not through submission, but through courage, wisdom, and determination. Before resting, she looked at the stars, her mind reflecting on all that had happened. The chains, the outlaws, the harsh desert. Each obstacle had tested her, yet each had strengthened her resolve. Freedom was not just the absence of captivity, it was the power to make choices, to stand tall, and to define one's own life. Naya had earned that freedom, and she would never let it go. Jack watched her silently, understanding the depth of her journey. He had been part of it, yes, but he had not claimed it. It was hers, her victory, her strength, her independence, and that was what made it so powerful. They had faced danger together, but Naya's triumph was uniquely hers, and he honored it fully. As they slept beneath the vast desert sky, the world around them was quiet and calm. The outlaws were gone, the chains were gone, and the future stretched out before them full of possibility. Naya had survived, claimed her freedom, and proven that no one could own her, not chains, not fear, not anyone in the world. And in the quiet desert night she felt the profound strength of her independence, knowing that she could face whatever came next with courage, wisdom, and unshakable determination.